You're listening to Tehachapi with Key Budge, Corey Costello, Greg Garrett, and Ashley Whitmore.
It's Tehachapi time. Key Budge, Corey Costello, Greg Garrett today. Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing good, Key. Thank you.
Beautiful.
All right. And today we have a special guest. We're highlighting each of our departments. We've kicked off the new fiscal year. We need to talk about the budget. Hamed Jones is here, our finance director. Hamed, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's nice to have you back. We're in our fiscal year. We're recording this here in July, and very recently we had our special budget hearing, as we do every year. And on June 26th, we passed another balanced budget.
Yeah, so we're a corporation, a public corporation, $42 million this year, revenue coming in. We're here to report and talk about a little bit about where that money goes. What do we spend it on? Public safety, police, fire, infrastructure, maintaining our streets and roads, water, wastewater, all those elements. Every single one of them are very, very important to the health of our city.
And like Greg said, so $42 million overall in revenue coming in. Our expenditure budget was about $40 million, so that's about a $2 million surplus overall. And most of that surplus is in the general fund. So the city's general fund, very healthy, got a surplus the next few years, got good fund balance reserves. Again, highlighting the work that the various departments have done, spending the citizens' money well. We're taking that Measure S money, utilizing it to preserve public safety, repair streets, potholes, kind of beautify the city and maintain, and the fire contract, making sure that we can sustain that.
Well said. With Measure S, so let's talk about that. You brought that up, and I really want to highlight that because to me, it's important that people understand they voted for something and it's in play. And this is now the first budget that this has been incorporated into.
And as promised, it's in the budget presentation, and it'll be online as well, where you can see what is being pulled from the Measure S funds. So the anticipated revenue from the additional 1 cent sales tax, and it's going to X amount of police officers, lieutenant, there's a few positions, public works positions. And then we've also taken some of that money too, when Hamed talked about some road stuff. We get projects, and I know there was a podcast recently about projects, and we'll get grant money up to a certain point. We may or may not have to match, or maybe we want to do a little bit more than what that grant will cover. And so we need to come up with money to help. Let's pave a little further past what this grant money will do. That's where the Measure S money comes in as well, to help us do a little bit more and do more of kind of bang for the buck on those projects or those grant funded things too. So yeah, it's all sort of in there now with what is being pulled from the Measure S funds.
Measure S was an investment in our future. There's no doubt about it. You just like at home, you're working and you have your checkbook and hopefully your savings account. You have to have revenues coming in to be able to, put your kids through college or pay your insurance bills, which has gone up, quite frankly, for the city. But, it's that big picture of the total revenue expenditures, money in, money out.
And as Hamed pointed out too, $2 million surplus, but without the Measure S money, there is no surplus. It would have been a lot different looking budget, which is what we talked about during the Measure S sort of education process. That go look it through the budget, and that's exactly what happened. You would have seen what happened without that money and what the impact would have had on a lot of departments, including public safety and infrastructure. One
One of the biggest impacts, Key, that's been hitting us is the unfunded mandates from the state of California. We could do an entire podcast on unfunded mandates and what the state is requiring local government agencies, county or cities, to implement and to pay for themselves. So they'll pass a law and say, you got to do this, you got to do that, but we're not going to fund it. And the money's got to come from somewhere. And so the radical thinking out of Sacramento is really been pinching our budget. So Measure S was key to continue to move forward in a positive direction.
And it doesn't always end there too. There's even, certain of our enterprise funds, especially if I'm thinking like refuse and recycling, are impacted by those unfunded mandates because we've had to spend more time than ever because of compliance with certain new rules and regulations and that sort of thing. And that impacts the bottom line of those funds because we're being told by the state, you must do this, you must spend more time, you must go look in trash can lids and that sort of thing. Stuff we'd have to do before, and all that time has to be counted somewhere.
Thinking about, you mentioned refuse, and my office is here next to yours, Corey, and the amount of time I hear you on the phone talking about recycling, cans, and all these things that the state is making you do follow up on and explore and research. And
a lot of paperwork.
It's incredible the amount of time. And that's just one example that the state sends down, with things that we haven't even implemented yet.
Yeah.
I haven't even told Corey, but I think I'm moving his office to WM or in Tennessee. Be more efficient, right?
Probably. I don't. Actually, no. It'd be more efficient to move my office to Sacramento because I got to deal with them more than anything on that. So I'm not looking forward to that.
Well, let's talk about some of the details, Hamed, with our budget. Start with general fund. How much money is coming in and what we're planning on spending those funds for this year. We've got a lot of projects in the queue, investing in equipment, those sorts of things. So let's talk about that.
General fund's got about 15.5 million coming in revenue and spending about 13 of that. So again, a couple $1 million surplus. You've got a match towards the airport's taxiway relocation and drainage project. That capital project, that's a $7 million project.
$7 million plus.
Yes, and so a lot of that funded by federal and state grants, but there is a general fund or a match required of about 5.5%, and so that's about $360,000 that the general fund will kick in towards that. There's a lot of other capital outlay from some of the departments, reinvesting in our infrastructure, some IT access control project, some UPS devices, police vehicles, just making sure that we're maintaining and replacing our infrastructure as needed.
All important projects.
And even the IT thing, we talk infrastructure, we don't think about that, but the IT piece, there's a lot of cyber attacks lately, and so we're always trying to stay in front of that. They target cities, they target governments, and so we've got to stay in front of that with different authentication patterns and all kinds of stuff that are being done, even through the county, actually working with them on some security grants from the federal government to make sure that stuff all is in this budget as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're required to have insurance. We have cyber insurance, and now with the market with cyber insurance, you have to have a lot of these IT things in place.
Yeah.
Multi-factor authentication. So those are the type of the investments that we're putting into IT to make sure that we have the proper insurance and even just touching on that. So in addition to some of the capital that we talked about that we're spending in the general fund, there's still, a lot of the other challenges that the general fund has to meet as far as operating expenditures. So insurance premiums are going up, 13% next year. Personnel costs, continue to rise, medical insurance. So, we're just trying to keep pace with all of those. And that's, again, where the Measure S money is helping us maintain, especially our public safety, and the fire contract, very large expenses that are going to eat up, some of that general fund balance going forward, especially if we did not get the Measure S revenue.
Well, just like at home, Southern California Edison, Southern California Gas, all of the street lights, it costs more money to keep them illuminated. Our business is just like your business at home.
Okay, we're seeing inflation across the board at levels that I remember back as a kid.
Remarkable numbers.
Yeah. And whether it's that loaf of bread or they're buying a sack of asphalt or whatever it is, it's like doubled.
It's
tripled,
a simple supply demand thing too as well. With even if I know the last inflation report came out today actually. Is it's slightly down, which is good. It's not as high as it has been. It's up, but it's not as high as it has been.
So it's climbing, but not as fast.
0.2 instead of being 1.5% like it was this time last year. It's like 0.2%. So much better. It's definitely, but that doesn't mean that there's still not a demand for a lot of things like labor, road projects. When people know this stuff coming in, the contractors know that their stuff's going to cost more. Their people going to cost more. Those bids go up, and that costs us more to get a road project done. It's not as easy as just throwing out some asphalt, because to your point, Key, the asphalt's more expensive, and the contractors bidding on that asphalt, they're in demand. We had a wet winter. Everybody was bidding at the same time because we couldn't get our projects out earlier. So it just makes things cost a little bit more, and it's all just kind of trickling down at this point. So,
and if you put things off, the cost is only going to go up next year.
Yeah.
So it's that never-ending. You've got to seize the moment, but you have to be prepared. And I think when we look at this and we talk about the costs of things escalating, I think we really want to highlight on the well-managed money that has taken place over the past years to put us in these positions where we can go out and, there's an adjustment in a cost, but we can survive that because we've got strong reserves and we've been conservative in how we budget.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And wastewater? So with our sewer plant, what's going on over there? What have we budgeted for there?
So sewer continues to be pretty healthy operating wise, and there are also a lot of capital being invested in. So they're looking at things like a clarifier overhaul, possible purchase for a new reclamation area. They've got a variety of capital costs, and so it's one of those things when you look at the numbers, you do see what shows as a deficit next fiscal year, but that is primarily because of how much capital is being reinvested. If you take out that capital, operating wise, they're at a surplus. So sewer fund or wastewater fund is one of the healthy funds, and again, just reinvesting back into their infrastructure.
Yeah.
If you look at the budget across a lot of the enterprise funds, especially, but water, wastewater specifically, streets and roads even as well, you'll see a lot of projects that they're maintenance, but they're also they're maintenance projects, but they're not necessarily deferred maintenance projects. There's some of those, but most of them are knowing that, okay, we get 5 years out of this piece, this clarifier at the plant, for example. Okay, we're on year 4. We're going to get this done before we get to year 5. We have a problem, and so a lot of this stuff is well in advance. A lot of these are being planned, so there's not a breakdown. So there's not an issue. And so rates and things stay reasonable, and they're not being spiked because of deferred maintenance on the plant. So, the public works team, the utilities team has done a great job making sure they stay in front of those issues and making sure everything operates. So that way you as a ratepayer don't see an impact to your bottom line.
Yeah, and another thing I think to point out too is that not only are we adopting our next fiscal year budget, but we're looking at the 4 years after, preliminary budgets. And it just to what you said, we're trying to identify those costs coming up over the next 5 years. We're not just looking at the next year and blindly waiting on those future years. So we kind of have a sense of what's coming so we can plan appropriately.
Yeah.
Now, when did that come into play, the planning looking 5 years? How long have we been doing that?
We've been presenting a 5-year plus budget, 15 or more years. So as Hamed pointed out, we adopt the next fiscal year's budget and the preliminary budget for the next 4 years. And that's really important because, I've said before, your budget is your playbook, if you will. And if you don't know where the numbers are, you really can't figure out where you're going to go. You might know where you want to go or where you want to end up, but if you don't have a fiscal plan, then you're never going to get there. So we've been doing it for 15 plus years. It's a great tool.
And that helps make sure you're not spending too much money this year or the following year, and then 5 years down the road, everything's in the red. We've gone through the budget multiple times, and 4 or 5 years down the road, it turns it into there's red and on the screen, and Greg will say, well, this isn't going to work, so we have to adjust now so we're not red 5 years down the road. So that's why that's super important as well. I think you can, to be able to see the impact of the money you spend today, what that means 5 years from now to the bottom line, to make sure to keep those in the black as much as possible.
We have spreadsheets that are linked to spreadsheets that are linked to spreadsheets.
I thought Hamed was changing that at some point. Is that your next task?
What's that movie? With
yes,
War Games, the Whopper. Woo, 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 woo. It's crazy, but in actuality, it's pretty straightforward. I don't want to simplify it, but it's pretty straightforward. You just can't spend more than you have, right? Sacramento does that. DC does that. The city of Tehachapi does not spend more than it has or more than it will receive.
And we also conservatively predict the revenues as well. You'll hear this in the news a lot, especially on the state front, sometimes with the Fed. But, there's going to be a deficit, and the deficit's because we projected way too much revenue last year and it didn't come in. So now we're $30 billion in the hole because we're $40 billion shy on revenue. So that's as well part of the sort of trick that Hamed plays, is trying to figure out based on historic trends what we can expect revenue-wise and then plan accordingly, and not just go with a crazy number hoping we get this much more revenue in and then budgeting on just kind of false numbers.
Yeah, so as Corey pointed out earlier, if something is showing in the red on the spreadsheet, we don't go to the revenue side and just pump it up. We actually start with a very conservative revenue, and then we build our spreadsheets off of that.
I'm definitely learning more as our communications is now a department officially, and getting immersed into the budget process. And you've got a great team that works for you. I had the opportunity to work with Sue very closely in developing and understanding, what to project for the year. You helped me out, but I guess and mine is a very small department, but when you look at some of these others, the police department, the public works, they've got a lot of personnel. I mean, there's a lot that goes, there's a lot of moving parts, all the projects that come in. It's amazing what gets done by such a small team that you have.
Yeah, and it's not just finance. I mean, finance does a great job. Like you said, a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of, starts a lot of time when we start projecting the numbers. We'll start with the personnel costs. We're looking at the salaries, the benefits, the insurance costs, and that kind of, we factor all those in. And then, we're getting our spreadsheets out to all the departments and then getting their feedback and their numbers for their operating expenses and their capital and kind of what their vision is for the future. And then another thing, I think the city does a great job with grants and capital projects, way more than I see at a lot of in past agencies that I've been with. So, for example, this year, overall, out of the $40 million expenditure budget, $15 million of that is on capital projects. Yeah, we said $7 million roughly was for the airport, but you've got another $7.5–8 million on street projects. There's the Valley Boulevard Park at a couple million. There's a lot of work being done by development services, public works, and then going after the grants. Almost all of these are close to 100% funded by grant money. So I mean, it's just a great job by all the staff at the city.
Well, and we've talked about this before many times, Key, and that is if you don't have a healthy budget, you can't go ask for a grant because, as Corey pointed out earlier, 5%, 10%, sometimes 20% matching components. And so we're able to match that, but also at the same time, we're growing our reserves. We have over $16 million in green cash in the bank. That's a lot of money. And God forbid, someday there's a fire, earthquake, flood, I don't know, some emergency. We may need to pull from that, or if we have a great opportunity to go build something or maintain something, we have a lot of flexibility now. So we've been growing our reserves for several years now. I'm very proud of that.
It's super important to have that money on hand to facilitate the grants. Greg and I have spoken with other cities in the past, and some not too far from here, that say, yeah, we're going to get this grant, but we don't know how we're going to be able to fund it or meet the matching component or put the cash out ahead of time, because the grant just doesn't come in a form of a check. You have to get reimbursed later. And so it's a problem for other communities that don't have those types of reserves or that sort of cash to pull from to get the grants to work. Because when the grants are substantial, you've got to have a substantial, like part of Hamed's job is make sure we don't run out of cash in the bank account, because the money goes out a lot for these grants, and then the reimbursement is sometimes slower than the rate at which it gets spent. So you got to have that whole thing, the whole system in place.
When we look at our, equipment, and our fleet, for example, I'm talking with Don Marsh, our public works director, and more of the unfunded mandates coming down from the state and electric vehicles and forcing, things that just absolutely don't make sense.
Well, the vehicles that don't exist, but also the charging stations that don't exist either.
There's no.
I mean, how are we going to get there from here? But we do have cash to be able to do it if we're by law required to implement it.
We're fortunate that way. But I mean, we look at other things like Edison not having the infrastructure to be able to provide the electricity for this high demand, or PG&E and, everyone else that provides energy here in the state. Right. We just continue to scratch our heads, unfunded mandates, and it impacts everybody. So we're fortunate to be financially healthy. Mm-hmm. Don't want to brag too much on that because not everyone is in that position, but I think we definitely need to highlight it.
Well, we have a great team that all are working towards the same goal, and it's a long-term goal. You don't balance a budget overnight. You have to work towards it. It's a multi-year process, and we continue doing it. Let's talk freshwater. So what's happening in our freshwater world, maintaining wells, delivery, those sorts of things?
So water, had a couple large capital projects in this last fiscal year, 22-23. We did a Cherry Lane mainline replacement, and then we actually had the Denison mainline replacement. It was originally slated for next fiscal year. That was moved up and done. So some large expenditures there did bring down the fund balance, or in the water fund. We do have some smaller, little capital outlay next year. Nothing too significant. Operating wise, water fund is one that we're going to be doing we budgeted for a rate study to take a look at and make sure that we're that our revenues are sufficient to keep up with our operating expenses. I think one of the things that we're continuing to monitor is last year's revenues were down a bit, and a lot of that was because of the wet winter we had. Less water being used because of how much rain, and so our revenues then were down. So where our revenues are going to go now in the future, is it going to go back to a dry season and kind of go back to the levels they were before? We don't know. So like Corey said earlier, we continue to budget conservatively. But by doing that, with our growing expenditures, that's where it's important to do a rate study and make sure that we're going to continue to have strong reserves going forward in the water fund.
I believe the city of Tehachapi is the lowest, if not one of the lowest, water suppliers, the cost to the consumer in the entire Tehachapi area. And of course, we want to keep it that way. But it costs a lot of money to pump water, to store water, to deliver water, to test the water, all of those elements. We need to make sure that everything is appropriate and as safe as it can be in the freshwater world.
And that's what's behind the bill for the most part. The water bill is mostly, it's the people behind it that pump the water, that do all the testing, that do the billing and all that stuff. I mean, it takes people. It's not just like, we don't charge you a water bill, it's fine. It's just water out of the ground. It's no big deal. Like there's a lot of costs going out that we don't want other taxpayers to subsidize, that is part of the people process of getting water from the ground into your tap.
Hamid, so our budget is here. It's done. There's still work that's being done with the budget book with your team. But what's next? What happens with the finance department? You guys don't take the rest of the year off.
No, it's and like you said, we're still doing
vacation request forms.
Yeah. There's a lot still left to be done with the budget. Like you said, with putting the budget book together, rallying the information from the departments. We've incorporated a lot of performance measures, a lot of tracking, so that we put this budget book together to meet kind of the best practices or what's recommended for government agencies, and then we submit those for awards. And we've been receiving awards for our budget as well as our financial statements each year. So this is kind of the next couple months. It's going to be, we're putting the budget into our financial system. We're finishing up the budget document. We'll submit for the awards. And then the departments, they start monitoring their budget and they start getting those big projects done with the money that's there. And then after that, we go right into audit season. So we close our books probably in September after we get all our June invoices in. We start doing all our year-end accounting entries, and then we get ready for our auditors that come in October. And so it's that fall season continues to be very busy. So we just roll right from budget right into the audit season.
Let me roll back to the awards. I know over the past several years, the department's received awards. But awards are great, but what you guys do, when you get that information, you get that criticism back, mm-hmm. you actually put that into play and say what you can do better. And these are group of experts that actually look at the budget and they go through the fine details and say, outstanding job here. You might want to look at maybe doing this. And those are some things that you, as a department, you look at and then you make adjustments as needed.
That's exactly what we do. And like you said, we normally will get about 3 peer reviews. And a lot of times they're finance directors from other agencies. And so maybe they're doing things a little bit differently with their budget, or they're seeing things maybe that we're not doing, and so they'll offer recommendations. And so we can look at that and see if it's something that is viable for us to do. I was able to kind of take some stuff maybe from the city of Palmdale that we've done in the past and maybe kind of use a similar template and roll it into our budget. And so that helps us make sure that we're staying up with the standards. The other part that finance staff does is, there's 2 large agencies, GFOA, that's kind of more of a national agency for finance and best practices. And then we've got the California one, which is the CSMFO. So they both will offer webinars. They offer updates to all their recommendations each year. So staff, we make sure that we're on top of those each year, because there could be new standards that we have to implement, whole new pages and incorporate different tables into the budget and all that. So we do our best to stay on top of it all and then and meet whatever we can.
So you mean we don't follow the philosophy of, well, we've always done it that way.
No.
That's one of those, I know we talk about it all the time with different things, but if you start the conversation, well, we've always done it that way, well, odds are there's some problems.
I think there's a commercial on TV.
Is there?
About, some Spectrum or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But, Key, our budget is rock solid. And, we live in pretty uncertain economic times, globally, nationally. People have been talking about, officials and the private industry, recession, maybe not. It seems like it's been going on for two or more years. Yeah. And that trickle-down effect could be very problematic for us. But if we keep our budget solid, we keep our budget balanced, we keep nice reserves in the bank, the city of Tehachapi is going to be fine. And that's our goal, is to continue to be rock solid, to deliver the public safety and maintaining the infrastructure so that our citizens feel safe, they continue to invest, and they continue to go about their lives, which is really important. Then you don't get bogged down in that minutia you hear on the nightly news.
Yeah.
And I think the other is the quality of life that we all have. There is something about, if you live here, you do business here, there's a quality of life that you don't find in other places.
We continue to push the bar higher and higher for ourselves, and the public pushes us to raise the bar also. And we're happy to accommodate.
And there's some insulation there too. I mean, kind of what we've talked about this in the past. Sometimes the economic conditions of the state, the nation, the world don't impact us as fast for one reason or the other. And some of this is because of the accounting that we have, or because we have the flexibility to do a few things to keep the economy rolling. I'm seeing it now. I'm seeing a lot of small business investment, which I kind of predicted, because when the national sort of stuff starts to slow down and some layoffs happen at some corporations, people go, you know what, I'm just going to do my own thing. And we're seeing that happening now with some new businesses that are open in town that are small businesses now that come from that sort of. So we were able to sort of sometimes create our own little ecosystem. And I think that's where this budget speaks to that, to make sure all these things are healthy, even if you have these uncertain things around us. And I heard someone the other day refer to this kind of like looming recession or not as the Godot recession, as in, waiting for Godot, which he never shows up, is, spoiler alert on that book. And so that's kind of the whole, that's what they refer to it as, the Godot recession. We keep hearing the nightly news and this and that, and say, this looks like this is going to happen and this is going to happen, and it doesn't happen. And so you have to keep your business moving forward. I think with our budget and then just with the economy around us, that's still happening. So.
Well, with incredibly great employees and a solid budget, we weathered the recession, we weathered COVID, and we can weather whatever DC or Sacramento throws at us. And that's not a challenge to them. I don't want them to, but certainly if they do, we'll take it. We'll figure it out. We're entrepreneurs.
Oh, very good. All right. Well, Hamed, great job again to your whole team. I know how hard they work. I get the opportunity to go in and visit with them and talk to them about different things. And there's never a downtime. They've always got something going on and moving forward. And you've got a great team.
I'm very blessed. Very blessed.
All right.
Well, we've just hit the tops of the waves. I would encourage anybody that may listen to this podcast, or, friends, family, colleagues, business, come see us. We'd be happy to show you the details and go over the budget with you.
And if you'd like to review the budget, we've got it on our website
online,
so it's available for you to check out. And who knows what's in our future with the unfunded things that are coming next. I know you said not to jinx us, but we know that's inevitable. All right, guys, anything else that we want to bring out that we haven't touched on?
No, I think it was good. I think Hamed, this is his first. I think Hamed started here like last year, right before budget time, and he just had to go with it. So he had a whole year this is his whole first year, budget preparation. Then he did a very good job.
I think we'll keep him.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep him.
Is his probationary period up yet?
I did extend it. But,
oh, that's right.
Just
in
in
case.
cover.
Yeah.
That's a
Everybody's always on probation around here.
Yeah.
No one's ever off probation.
Well, every
around
2
here.
weeks we settle up. Right after that, there's no promises.
Well, very good. All right, Hamed, thank you for taking the time, breaking away, coming in and sharing this. I just think it's important that we talk to the public and remind them what we're doing. This is their money. This is their city. and we're very proud to work for them. And I think this is just another one of these jewels of showing being responsible and building confidence in the transparency that's needed.
Well said.
All right. All right, guys. Anything else in closing?
Good.
Looking good? All right, folks. If today's conversation has brought a thought, suggestion, you have a question, please send them to us at media@tehachapicityhall.com. We appreciate the time you spend with us, and we'll catch you again soon right here on Tehachapod.
Tehachapod is a conversation about Tehachapi, featuring the community members who make this such a special place to call home. If you have a question or a thought you'd like to share, email media@tehachapicityhall.com. Thank you to Gary Mazzola for sharing his song, This is Tehachapi.